Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Quincy, Chair of the Ways and Means Committee, and this is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Ways and Means Committee, and joined by Council Members Palmisano, Johnson, Bender, and Council Vice President Glidden. So we're a quorum of the committee and can begin. Today we have a number of items today. Let's see, I'm looking at our consent agenda is like 26 items, and I'll read through those really quickly. The first item here is a attorney from the city attorney's office is a defense and indemnification of Officer Blaine Lehner in the matter of Luis Daniel Garcia versus Blaine Lehner and the city of Minneapolis. And that I'll get to in a moment as I'll read through the rest of the agenda. Sorry about that delay. Legal settlement of Jesse McLemore versus the city of Minneapolis. A contract amendment with the Domestic Abuse Project for 24-hour domestic abuse hotline services. The City Coordinator's Department is bringing forward a memorandum of agreement with Local Initiatives Support Corporation for consultation services. We have a contract amendment with Lynn Anderson for professional leadership and project advisory services, and the 2015 charitable campaign final report. The Convention Center is bringing forward the low bid with Peterson Companies for rainwater storage and irrigation systems retrofit project at the Convention Center. Human Resources Department brings forward a contract amendment with Common Sense Consulting to provide leadership development and cultural intelligence training. Information Technology Department brings forward a number of contracts with 3 recruitment service vendors to fill various IT positions. A contract amendment with Segeti USA LLC for Workforce Director Application Software. And then referred from the Community Development Regulatory Services Committee, we have item number 12, which is an environmental grant acceptance for fall 2015 Brownfield Grant Round. The Public Safety, Civil Rights, and Emergency Management Committee forwards a Minnesota Board of Firefighter Training and Education training reimbursement, a revenue contract with the University of Minnesota for security services at TCF Stadium for the Vikings playoff football game, a revenue contract with Minneapolis Public Housing Authority and the city Minneapolis Police Department to provide security services, a contract for patrol, which is the Peace Officer Accredited Training Online with the League of Minnesota Cities for registration costs, and a contract amendment with the University of Minnesota College of Veterinary Medicine Center for Police Canine Care. The Transportation and Public Works Committees brings forward the Standish Area Residential and Howe Area Residential Resurfacing Project, the Unpaved Alley Resurfacing Program, the 8th Street Reconstruction Project, East 38th Street Reconstruction Project, Road Maintenance Agreement with Hennepin County, contract amendment with Morcon Construction Company for elevator modernization at various parking ramps, the Hennepin County Bicycle and Sidewalk Grant Program funding application, and a bid for fine aggregate with Fisher Mining LLC. So those are the consent items, but before I read those or move those items, we do have an interest in hearing from Joe Kelly, who's the attorney for Blaine Lehner, and he is present. And if you'd like to speak to the committee, that would be welcome. It should just take a few minutes, but Mr. Kelly, if you'd like to speak, please do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council members, my name is Joe Kelly. I'm the attorney for Officer Blaine Lehner in both the civil lawsuit and then the underlying request for indemnification that's in front of you today. What I want to first point out is state that the city has defended and indemnified police officers in similar situations or far worse allegations, in fact, including the allegation that's following this item on your agenda. Refusing to defend and indemnify an officer in this situation discourages vigorous law enforcement and will cause officers to second guess themselves, which will ultimately cause a danger to the officers and the public. The facts of the case that are in front of you on the request for indemnification involve Mr. Garcia, who is an individual who was impaired from the use of alcohol and was resisting officers during every step of his encounter with police officers. Garcia, once placed in the back of his squad car, went out of control by slamming his head into the divider and into the bars of the window. He was kicking all parts of the car, and slamming his head and face into the different portions of metal and plastic in the vehicle. He stopped for a moment, and at that moment, Officer Blaine Leonard took that opportunity to intervene and tell him to stop hitting and kicking inside the squad car. Garcia, after the door was opened, turned, identified a target of Officer Leonard, and kicked directed at Officer Leonard, attempting to strike him. And when he did so, he hooked his leg on the exterior of the door, leaning back in an attempt to continue his attack. At this point, Officer Leonard could not slam the door as it would guarantee a significant injury to Garcia. And he could not just stand back behind a door as it would allow Garcia to escape. Leonard used a forcive technique that he was trained in the Minneapolis Police Department, a push kick or a thrust kick towards the torso, a large portion of the body of the individual in the back of the squad car. The purpose of the push kick is to create distance or push the subject off balance. It is not an offensive type of attack. It is a purely defensive move. In the course of the push kick, with his leg hooked on the outside of the door, instead of kicking again at Officer Leonard, he shot the remainder of his upper body and his head forward at the same time the push kick was being pushed towards Garcia. Leonard, after pushing Garcia back into the squad car, closed the door as the door was now free to be shut. Garcia was removed by Officers Leonard and Wernan. At the time of removal, Garcia was conscious. He was conscious. He was placed on the ground, and after he was placed on the ground, a small pool of blood was noticed by officers. Because of this, the officers called for a supervisor to review the use of force, and they'd already decided they were going to take him to HCMC. Sergeant Altonen came to the scene and attempted to interview Garcia, who again continued to act out and refused to cooperate with the interview. Nobody else observed the use of force. This shows how actually minimal the use of force was. There were multiple officers that were on the scene, one that was mere feet away from the incident. Sergeant Altonen, after reviewing the use of force and the statements made by Officer Leonard and Mr. Garcia, or lack thereof, determined that the use of force was reasonable within department policies, trainings, and procedures, and determined that it was not unreasonable. He submitted his use of force report, which was ultimately reviewed by the Internal Affairs Unit. Internal Affairs Unit reviewed the entire report, including all of the facts involved in the report. Internal Affairs ultimately determined that it was within department policies and procedures, and determined that it was not excessive and did not request a further investigation. Prior to the Office Administrative hearing that is before you, the recommendation that's before you, Officer Leonard was never interviewed or spoken to about this incident by anybody from the city. He was never told that his actions were wrong or outside of training or outside of policies or excessive. Leonard did not intend to strike Garcia in the head. He intended to strike Garcia in the torso, pursuant to the training that he received from Minneapolis Police Department. However, as many of you may know, it's not only the officer that gets a vote in the action, it's also the individual who is fighting with officers. The focus of the judge's decision that's in front of you were the alternatives to opening the door. However, that's not the question in a use of force. The question is, what was the use of force that he used reasonable? The ALJ only gives two alternatives to that use of force. One, to use the door as a shield, effectively allowing Garcia a free rein to escape. Or two, to use the door as an instrument of force. Pursuant to policy, this is actually a higher use of force than the use of a strike or a kick. And that's pursuant to the Minneapolis Police Department's use of force continuum that you should have. Use of an impact weapon or an improvised weapon is a higher use of force than a kick or a punch or a hard empty hand technique. Additionally, the ALJ recommends that Officer Leonard should have just opened the window and used a chemical agent on Garcia in the back of the squad car. Again, under the use of force continuum in the training of the Minneapolis Police Department, that is equivalent to the use of force of an empty hand, a hard empty hand technique. It is the same level on the use of force continuum as CS or OC gas, as a taser, or strikes or stuns. They are on the same level. So the question is, if those are in fact the alternatives that should have been utilized, then under the Minneapolis Police Department use of force continuum, they are actually authorized. I urge you to review the not only the ALJ's decision, but I also urge you to review the submissions made by both myself and the city's attorney. I also urge you to review the independent use of force expert, St. Paul Police Commander Officer Stephen Frazier, who reviewed the use of force. And although he's not a Minneapolis police officer, he did find it reasonable under general police practices. And considering the number of instances of violence against officers by individuals who happen to be in handcuffs, that does not render them unable to be violent on officers. And that is proven not only in other cases, but in this case here. Again, I urge you to review the use of force or the ALJ recommendations. Deputy Chief Clampy testified that he had never heard of a push kick, but if you were to review the actual department training guidelines and talk to use of force trainers to include Sergeant Todd Savageau, Sergeant Cheryl Schmidt, and Lieutenant Jack Kelly actually did instruct, all of those instructed the use of a push kick. And they use push kick interchangeably with thrust kick. And it's a matter of semantics that the ALG got tied up on. The fact is that this is a use of force that is trained by MPD, not just MPD, but is recognized nationwide as a use of force. It is not an offensive kick. It's not a front kick or a roundhouse kick. The purpose of it is to push the individual back. And if the alternative was to slam the door shut and using an impact weapon, again, that is a higher level of force under the Minneapolis Police Department training and policies and procedures. And under all of the policies and procedures, the use of chemical agents and impact weapons, those are only to be used on individuals who are engaging in active aggression. Kicking at a police officer under Minneapolis Police Department policies is active aggression. And in this instance, the individual kicked, hooked his leg, and made it possible for him to continue his attack or to escape. So I urge you, for the benefit of the city and the officers of the Minneapolis Police Department, to vote to recommend to this full council to defend and indemnify Officer Blaine Leonard, because a failure to do so calls into question some officers that are out there required to use force. And if every time that actually have to use force, they're turning around and being told that they're not going to defend and indemnify, not based upon facts that were presented at the hearing, because there was only two witnesses, Officers Blaine Leonard and Officer Steve Warren, that provided factual testimony. There were no other witnesses that were provided at the ALJ. The plaintiff was not presented to present facts, and in fact, his only version of events was not even a sworn statement. It was his attorney's complaint. That was the version of facts that was accepted by the city. It wasn't the reports that were drafted. It was the complaint, not a sworn statement by the plaintiff. So for the city and for the public to turn around and not defend and indemnify flies in the face of the intent of Chapter 466.07. It's not intended to be utilized to prevent defense and indemnification against law enforcement unless it's so serious and egregious that the city should not be forced to defend and indemnify. This is not one of those situations.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to move the consent agenda as I outlined them earlier. I just wanted to clarify. Item number 2 is approving the city staff's denial and defense and indemnity pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 466.07, Subdivision 1 for Blaine Lehner in the matter of Luis Daniel Garcia and Blaine versus Blaine Lehner and the City of Minneapolis. U.S. District Court, District of Minnesota, Court File 15/03214, and adopting the relevant factual basis as set forth in numbers 1 through 36, 40 through 43, 63 through 65 of the findings of fact conclusions of law and recommendation of Chief Administrative Law Judge Tammy Pust in Office of Administrative Hearings to the matter. Any questions or any comments on the consent items? Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask a question of the city attorney just with regards to item number 2, and this is much more of a procedural issue, but we just heard from Mr. Kelly, and Mr. Kelly is asking us to overrule the decision of the police department, of our city attorney's office, and the ALJ with regards to this matter. Is that correct?
Mr. Emel?
Chair Quincy and Councilmember Yang, he is asking for the opposite of what staff is asking you to do. Yes.
Any further questions? Not seeing any. All those in favor of the consent items, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Those items carry. The next item on our agenda is a public hearing. This is in response to an ordinance amending Title 18, Chapter 160 of the Minnesota Code relating to disposal of surplus property to allow for donations of City of Minneapolis property. Ms. Christensen, are you going to be handling some of the presentation on this? Before I begin, thank you for that, Ms. Christensen. I just wanted to note we've been joined by Councilmember Yang on the committee and also Councilmember Warsami, who is the author of this ordinance. So if you would, Ms. Christensen.
Thank you, Chair Quincy and members of the committee. The action before you today for the public hearing is a proposal with amended language regarding the ordinance for the disposition of city surplus equipment. The recommendation is an effort to streamline the process to allow for more expeditious disposal of that equipment, as well as to provide the option for the city to donate the unneeded property in the city's inventory. So the staff will be working on implementing a procedure and policy document that will allow for more flexibility in the ongoing activity.
Okay, thank you very much. I think many of us have had a chance to speak to Councilmember Warsami's office on this particular topic. I've had the chance to talk to other department heads, and I know that there's some revised language being recommended. So perhaps Councilmember Warsami, if you'd like to speak to the ordinance in general before I open the public hearing.
Thank you, Chair Quincy. I'm excited to sponsor this change to our ordinance, which will bring into alignment with our city goals and the public purpose to which we all endeavor to uphold. The current ordinance prescribes a limited number of entities to which we can donate an item, and in practice, we end up paying third-party entities to dispose of the property. The ordinance would now provide for the creation of policies and procedures which will ensure that property is donated in a way that fits our values and ensures that we have the flexibility to find the best use for our surplus property. Additionally, this ordinance change allows us to further affirm connections between other entities such as nonprofits, counties, sister cities, and other jurisdictions. As a good steward of public dollars, we should be constantly striving to make sure that our policies and procedures reflect that care. I would like to thank staff for all their hard work on this ordinance so that it is reflective of the needs of different stakeholders involved, in particular the City Clerk's Office, City Attorney's Office, City Coordinator's Office, Finance, and Department of Public Works. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Councilmember Warsami. As this is a public hearing, I'm happy to open that public hearing now. Is anyone here to speak to this topic? Anyone? Anyone? Not seeing any. I'll close the public hearing. And just like to speak to this briefly. I think it's important to revise our policies, and what a lot of this does is really puts the onus back to the procurement department and finance property services to come up with some updated policies, which I think are certainly in need of. So I'm happy to move the revised version of the ordinance language that should be in front of everybody today. As well as offer a staff direction, which is asking the procurement staff of the Finance Property Services Department directed to develop a policy and procedure for disposal of surplus property, and shall report back to this committee with that policy by the end of June of 2016. So we can have a revised policy in front of this committee as we adopt the ordinance change. Any questions or comments from committee members on the ordinance, the staff direction? Not seeing any. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And that item carries. Thank you very much. We'll now move to the discussion items on our agenda. And we have, I think there are two of them. And they're both related to Target Center. Item number 26 is the issuance of term loan note for Target Center Renovation Project. Ms. Christensen, are you going to be introducing, or Mr. Ablin, be able to speak to this item and lead us through this presentation? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and council members. I'm Michael Ablin, Director of Capital and Debt for the city. And the item before you today is approval of the issuance of a term loan note to Wells Fargo Bank for $74 million. This is essentially the construction financing that the city will provide for the Target Center project. These dollars are matched by $49 million of money from the team, the Timberwolves, and also $5.9 million from AEG, who is the operator of the Target Center Arena for shows and all the other events that occur there. I do have a couple of people in the audience today that have helped get this to this point. I have Paul Rebholz from Wells Fargo Bank, was working with him, and also Jim Mulrooney, who was not able to make it. And on the city side, our bond counsel, John Utley, has been working tirelessly on this loan agreement as well. So without them, we wouldn't be here today. But basically, this arrangement is a short-term financing. It's in variable rate mode. Short-term interest rates are exceedingly low right now. So during the construction of this facility and these improvements, what's going to happen is the city will pay expenditures, and then we will get a drawdown from Wells Fargo that will then be matched by pro rata shares of dollars from the team, and then also using some of the contributions from AEG. So I'll answer any questions anybody has about the financing or the note, or if we need to solicit others' input here.
Sounds fine. In essence, this is a $74 million line of credit. We'll only be paying interest on what we're borrowing as we're doing it, so it's a step-by-step process rather than issuing bonds and paying interest on the full term, the full amount, which would cost us how much additional if we were to do that.
Mr. Chair, you're exactly right. This is a slowly get into debt sort of arrangement. So as the city incurs expenses, we will make a draw, and then we'll start paying interest on that draw. And we'll pay some more expenses, and we'll draw some funds again, and we'll have a little bit more that we're paying interest on. Using this methodology, the difference is we pay a small fee for the ability to draw those funds, and that's called a commitment fee or unused facility fee. That's 12 basis points, so 0.12%. And then once we do draw the bonds, we'll pay the one week LIBOR rate plus a bank spread. And the difference between issuing everything up front would be basically issuing $74 million at an approximate rate of interest of about 3.25% versus this either 0.12% when we're not there yet, or roughly 65 to 75 basis points, or which is 0.65 to 0.75 during the drawdown period on the loan. So basically we're saving 2.6% on $74 million throughout the time frame that we're drawing these funds. So it ends up saving the city, $2.5 to $3 million doing it this way versus issuing all the debt all at once, paying interest immediately on the full amount of our share of cost.
Good. Thank you for that. Are there any additional questions for Mr. Ablin on this item? Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Mr. Ablin, for doing this. Thank you for our partners at Wells, and of course, Mr. Utley, for your careful work on making sure that the numbers add up right. Thank you very much for that. I'd like to move approval of this item. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that item carries. The next item is the more fulsome discussion that came from the Community Development Regulatory Services Committee. We have Mr. Johnson here. He's going to walk us through the Target Center Renovation Project authorization.
Thank you, Committee Chair Quincy and committee members. My name is Jeff Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of the Minneapolis Convention Center and also the Project Manager for the Target Center Renovation. It's an exciting day to actually be here and talk about the facility and what we're doing to the facility and how we're going to be renovating that facility upon your approval. Last year, the City Council approved the renovation agreement, which set forth the framework for this renovation partnership. That agreement outlined the three-way partnership with AEG, which is our operator of the Target Center, the Timberwolves and Lynx basketball team, and then, of course, the city. Today, I want to walk you through what we plan to do with our investment in the Target Center. So the total cost is $128.9 million. Of that, $102.8 million will be used for construction, and that will provide a significant update to the arena and its infrastructure. On the interior, we will provide mechanical infrastructure and technology system upgrades. We're going to provide another elevator. We're going to reconfigure the Skyway entrance and add a grand lobby space with a new ticket box office. The suite level is going to receive a new redesign with more flexible seating options and new finishes and amenities. New premium food and beverage spaces will be added to give guests the amenities that they have grown to desire and are currently available in competitive facilities, both in our region, but then outside of our region. We'll also be adding more sustainable lighting, water usage, and heating and cooling to the building. I brought some slides along to show you what the building will actually look like. And so, head back to that last one. So the first slide really shows one of the major components to the change of Target Center, and that is moving the entrance from the middle of the block on 1st Avenue to the corner of 6th and 1st. The corner of 6th and 1st has gained so much more activity since the addition of Target Field behind the Target Center, and we wanted to make sure that we could open up this facility and have this grand entrance. One, so that we can show the energy that's going on inside of Target Center, because right now you can walk by the Target Center and you may not even know that anything is going on inside. This allows you to look inside and see all that activity that is happening in the Target Center. But it also allows people that are inside to look at all of the activity and the vibrancy that is happening in Minneapolis, and we thought that was a great way to make sure that people got to see how beautiful our city is. The next slide really shows then down 1st Avenue how we have changed the pedestrian experience. And as you can see, the middle left of this picture is where the front entrance used to be. That is now going to be the entrance to a new premium area. But it is an area that has been raised from its current condition of being a one-story, very much a concrete and cold environment, to a 2-story, very light, open, and more modern look to it. We feel that this will really add to the pedestrian experience, both on 1st Avenue and then, as we'll see in different pictures, around the corner to 7th, which then connects into, again, Target Field. As we have said in the past, when the Target Center was built, there was no Target Field, there was no activity in the North Loop, there wasn't light rail, there wasn't that opportunity to really walk behind the Target Center, and we wanted to make sure that we had a great pedestrian experience for people walking around the Target Center, because so many more people do now each and every day. So we're going to look at some exterior pictures. I brought along the exterior cladding of the new Target Center. This is a metal cladding that will go on the outside of the Target Center. You can see it depicted as kind of the brown material in the middle area of the Target Center. It is copper-like. It is not copper. It will not patina, but it will have different colors. It's harder to show that in one piece. It will have different colors, but generally it will have this look to it. We're really excited about this, really taking the Target Center and changing it, making it look more like its surroundings. When you think of Butler Square, which is right next to it, and some of the other buildings that are close by, this will help it really fit in better to the city and to its surroundings. This is a view of First Avenue side of the Target Center. One of the things that I wanted to point out, if you look at the Target Center today, there are a lot of signs and clutter all over the building, and we wanted to make sure that we cleaned some of that up. And so this is what it will look like, and the signage will look as it does on this rendering. Most of the signage has been moved to the corner of 7th Street and then at each of the entrances. And so we feel like it has a much cleaner, more modern look going forward. We're looking now at 7th Street. It's a little hard to tell here. There'll be a better picture coming, but one of the main things that we have done in this design is added on a loading dock to the Target Center. Hospitality buildings, arenas, convention centers, stadiums are always built with loading docks. The Target Center was not. And so what that means is instead of having a place where you can back up to and offload equipment, right now the Target Center has a drive-through where then employees have to bring it off the truck and bring it down a ramp and onto the floor. That's very inefficient, and it costs AEG, it costs the city a lot more money to host events. And so this new loading dock will allow us to have a more efficient loading experience. It will also help us keep a lot of the trucks and buses off of the city streets and into this loading dock area, which we think will help a lot with safety and the activity of cars going through in that area. You will see on the back left side of this picture a skyway. I just want to make sure that everyone understands that is a alternate. Right now it is not in the budget, but we are very hopeful that through some of the options that we have that we can get this skyway back into the project. It would connect from the ramps next to the A and B ramps next to the Target Center into the Target Center, so there would be another way to get into Target Center, which would help immensely. This is a look along 6th, so the Butler Square side. Big things here that we're doing is on that corner of 6th and 1st, we are adding a new entrance for Lifetime Fitness. So Lifetime Fitness has gone through a major renovation over the last few years. It's a beautiful new facility, and they have always had challenges with the entrance that we currently have. As we bring our new grand lobby entrance, we will also have a new entrance for Lifetime Fitness. It will all work much better for us operationally and also for them as they have invested millions of dollars into their club. This is the back side, again, the side that people never used to see, the 2nd Avenue side. Again, just the cladding that we'll see on this side. The next picture, if you want to click to that, shows what we will see from Target Field. So again, a view that is on television many, many times each year as the Twins hit home runs out to right field. We want to make sure that that Target Center looks great along with the rest of our Skyway, and we're proud of how this turned out and think that it will add a lot to our Skyway or our skyline going forward in the future. And then this is a better look at the pedestrian experience along 7th. So as you can see, the loading dock juts out a little bit down in the far left corner. We'll be adding in some greenery on the green wall along the side of 7th. And the sidewalk there, which is currently about 9 feet wide, will go to 14 to 16 feet wide. So again, with so many more pedestrians in this area, it will be a much wider area and much easier to get through that section of the street. I wanted to look at the schedule and just give a quick look at the schedule for what we are proposing. We are on a very tight schedule. Construction, we hope to start this May, focusing on renovating of the suite level first. In August, we'll be shutting down the Target Center for about a month as we install a new scoreboard. During the midsummer time, we'll be starting some of the exterior work and working around the building. The building will remain open for the 2016-17 Timberwolves season. Then in 2017, we'll shut down the building for about 4.5 months in the summer, and that's where we'll do a lot of the really heavy work, that structural work. We'll finish up that 6th and 1st entrance area. And we're scheduled to be completed by the start of the 2017-18 Timberwolf season, which will be November-ish, October-ish of 2017. So at this point, I will stop and let Chair Quincy direct how we go forward.
Good. Well, thank you very much. And thank you in advance for all of the work that you've done on this over the last several years. It's been a long time coming, hasn't it? And that with that time delay has certainly increased costs and made for some difficult choices between the city and our partners. So thank you very much for your work on negotiating the deal in the first place, but then make sure that we kept in line with what our spending authority was. So we did not dip into additional costs, even though there were additional time in the process. Obviously, I'm most interested in the pedestrian experience. I think that's a tremendous benefit, especially as it makes it so much more vibrant in that area. One could say that it's a perfectly useful facility now, but it is not. It does not meet our contractual obligations, and it certainly doesn't take advantage of all the economic impact that's happening down in that area. So with all that being said, the green wall is exciting. The loading dock is essential, and that wasn't part of the original project. So thanks for putting that big step into the stadium, because it will improve the efficiency and the operations of the facility. And it's our facility, so we own it. So we got to make sure it's the best, and we can maintain it as a world-class venue for the arena operations, not just for the basketball, although the Lynx make great use of it, and they're doing a fabulous job. We know the Timberwolves will be back someday in their winning ways, but the concerts that we do, we've seen the Polestar numbers, and what this generates for the city is really a good deal. So thank you very much for your work on that, and anxious to get you working so you can start building some of this stuff. So happen to have any other questions or comments from council members? Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to comment on the motion. So is now the time, or do you want to?
No, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I will not be voting for this today, and I have some comments on that. But first, I do want to thank Jeff Johnson and staff and the whole project team for their work on it. You're obviously here to advocate for these facilities, and you do a very darn good job of it. And the renderings are frankly beautiful, and I in no way am critical of the efforts you all have put into this effort or this project, and you're definitely working hard on behalf of making this facility as strong as you possibly can. I also am happy that we have the Timberwolves and the Lynx within our city. I want to see them stay here. I'm happy that we have this facility as well. But what I'm concerned about, I know most of you have already voted on this, by the way, and I'll throw that out there and say that, you know, it's not too late to vote against this if you so choose. But really the issue I have with this is around spending in our city and priorities and needs in general. We saw the report that came out. We have $30 million shortfall per year in basic road maintenance. I sure hope we support, you know, putting money into our roads that we need to. We have a $14 million a year shortfall in park maintenance. Are we going to support that individually as council members and make sure that our parks don't have ceiling tiles falling off in the facilities and fields turning to mud? We have understaffed our fire department. The chief says the safe staffing level is 418. We don't have 418 right now. Our budget's only authorizing them to 406. This weekend, we saw a story come out about a 27% increase in response times in North Minneapolis for critical police incidents. And we have all 5 precincts pushing for more officers on the street as violent crime is going up in our city. We increasingly have an aging population that is sensitive to property tax increases. And I know that council members on this committee and on the council overall have been obviously good stewards of looking at levy increases and being sensitive to those impacts of property taxes on their constituents. So we have all of these needs, even our schools. Clearly there's an opportunity around building world-class schools in terms of return on investment. There's no better return on investment than education. If we want to help our local economy and help grow a strong Minneapolis for years to come, we should be investing even more in our schools than we are today. And so there's all these needs, and they're balanced out obviously with property taxes. And it seems to me like We are willing to spare no expense when it comes to these facilities. And indeed, we're trying to make this a world-class facility, but I want to make Minneapolis a world-class city. And how are we going to do that if we are shortchanging consistently many of our core basic public services that our constituents rely on, that make our city a place that people want to be? And ultimately, is the scale going to tip? Are we going to allow it to tip to a place where people would rather move outside, where they can maybe get lower taxes, and maybe they feel better about crime rates or the schools or what have you? Or are we going to work and put our funding priorities straight here and invest where it's ultimately going to drive even more people into the city, make our city an even better place to live, an even better place for businesses to reside, and ultimately increase the economic activity far more than prettying up this facility will? And so I urge my colleagues today to reconsider it. I know you voted in favor time and again on various parts along this, and so maybe it feels like it's a done deal and you just have to go along with it. But think about it. I mean, there are so many different priorities, definitely more than $50 million in spending where we currently have a gap. And so what are we going to put that money into? Are we going to put it into schools, parks, roads, public safety, or are we going to focus mainly on sports facilities when we've already poured so much money into them? And that's all I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I should formally move this before there's additional discussion, so allow me to do that. Is there any other comments on behalf of council members? Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also will not be supporting this. I did not support it originally when it came to committee for many of the reasons that Councilmember Johnson has already articulated. There's a wide body of research evidence about stadiums and how they are not good public investments in terms of a return on investment. And there's been ad nauseum debates in the city of Minneapolis about stadium funding, but I'm someone who believes that we should be investing in things that have a proven economic impact. Stadiums do not. And so even though we own this one, I see no difference there. I know that has been a difference for others, but it is not for me. I don't think that because we own something, we should spend more money in order to lose less money in the long run. So that was the position I took when it first came, and the position I still hold today.
Thank you. Council Vice President Glidden.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Well, I can appreciate kind of this long articulation of the challenges of governing, which is something that I think all of us deal with every day, is trying to balance needs that we hear about from looking at data, from hearing from our constituents, from trying to understand the core basic services of the city. And so, and I don't think that these, even though I may disagree with the decision here, I don't disagree with the challenge that's been articulated with trying to figure out how best to allocate our money. And I will say too that although I have been a supporter, and I will support today this allocation of funding to renovate our city-owned asset, the Target Center. I am someone who publicly has been a little bit challenged with what I feel are too many large facilities for the Twin Cities as a whole. I'll maybe state it that way. I think that as a community, we could have done a better job, and I hope we still have opportunities to do so, to connect our plans for supporting so many facilities, because it is the public that ends up paying for these facilities in a better way across the Twin Cities region. This, however, is something that's a bit of a different decision than trying to make another hard decision about whether or not the city should invest in a new facility. Because this is a facility, and I'll just say this is like one of the storied things in the city of Minneapolis is the debate about the city's decision in 1995 to own this facility. And I wasn't on the city council at that time, so I end up being someone who's doing a little bit of backseat driving. I think the last council, this was one of the items where kind of almost to a person that folks said that they wish that decision had not been made, but that we here are needing to make responsible decisions with the fact that today we own the Target Center. And owning the Target Center doesn't just come with the fact of trying to figure out what do you need to do to keep the Target Center afloat, so to speak, but we also are bound by some contractual responsibilities that guide how much we need to invest into the facility to keep it to a certain standard and quality. And people also can discuss and debate whether those were contracts that were to the benefit of the city of Minneapolis and how much or how not that was. But again, we have had these contractual relationships that guide the amount of investment that we need to make on into the future for this facility. There is no doubt that this is a facility, again, that we own, that we are contractually bound to keep up to a certain level of facility. It's not a world-class facility, I will say, but it is a very nice facility. And I think that we have done the best that we can by being responsible with our spending to reuse and renovate an existing facility rather than being faced with, I think, a more difficult decision, which is that it will cost a lot of money to figure out how to do something different with this space. And I don't know that we are appropriately positioned right now with a number of years still remaining on our existing contract with the Timberwolves, which again kind of ties how things work with the facility to figure out, is it responsible or not to have a different direction for what to happen with this very, very large space in the middle of downtown. This is a workhorse of a facility. It has a ton of events that happen in it every week, every month, every year. It's a very different facility than, as an example, a football stadium or some of these other facilities that just don't have that kind of regular activity that is, again, driving what happens in the downtown area. So be it as it may, I think that we did the best job that could be done at the city of Minneapolis. I do think that this is a responsible decision. And despite the fact that I am someone who believes we have too many large facilities, but this is the one that we own, have owned since 1995, and we need to figure out, and there's, again, I think it is fair to have debate about what's the right course here, but I think that this is the right course for now.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Not seeing any. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That item carries. Are there any additional items on the agenda? Clerk, I think we're all caught up. Seeing nothing further, we stand adjourned.